welcome to the Liverpool Community Podcast. And for the first time, you're getting not just one American, but two. Two Americans from New York, actually. And I'm joined here by Luna Munoz. Luna Munoz. Yes, look at
Yes,
that.
that's perfect.
Spanish and all that and everything. A career coaching and counseling. A career coaching and consult. I'm just going to just say career coaching and consultancy.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, yeah, okay. Hey, Luna, how you doing?
I'm great.
We've been
Thanks for
having a
having me.
great conversation, before the show started, as we usually do. But because we're both like kind of like not just American, but from New York, it was going all over the place, wasn't it? It
Yeah.
was like it's fantastic. How about you? Because I know you've been here for some time now.
Mhm.
How are you with hearing accents and stuff like that? Are you able to ascertain like different people's accents? Have you managed to adjust to the Scouts?
Somewhat. I've been here 7 years in Liverpool. Before that, it was Durham, so I had a lot
Yeah,
of Geordie accents to get
yeah,
used
yeah,
to. And before that was Lancashire,
yeah.
so I feel like I know the North, but South, no, I
Oh
can't.
my
Or
God, no.
even Midlands. I've like asked people, "Are you from Australia?" I
Yeah,
just like don't know
yeah.
Midlands at all.
Well, it's I find it fascinating, because we're like everybody's fascinated with New York, of course,
Mhm.
but they never go. They always go to like Florida. You know what I mean? It's like if you're so fascinated with New York, I don't understand. Why don't you just jump over there? Because it doesn't have Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
It's
the Big
just
Apple, but it doesn't really have like.
it's hard Mickey Mouse, man. We gotta go to Disneyland or Disney. You know what I mean? But I so want to go to New York. I mean, how many times do you get that?
Yeah, definitely. And I usually say to them, you should come to Long Island as well, because we got beaches. I mean, why would you not want to go to the beach?
You got a beach in Long Island. I didn't even know what that is. And everything. And I know because I said to you, the first thing I said to you was like, "Ooh, Long Island, what exit?" Which is a great term that you always say to people from Long Island and stuff because it's so vast. When you go down the exits and stuff.
Yes, I've never made it to the very end of Long Island.
I don't think anybody has really. That's kind of like going to the end of the world or something, or Land's End as they call it out here, and everything. So you left America what, like in 2005? You said.
2005,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and now your history is pretty fascinating and vast. It's like I kind of like equated it to like a traveling bunny because you jumped all over the place and stuff. Before we go back there, let's just talk a little bit about Luna leadership.
Yeah.
Which is what you're working on at present.
Yes.
In your present form. So tell me, what does Luna leadership do or provide?
Well, I like to say that I lead the heart led people, the change makers, to have more of an impact. So that can take many different forms. So I help nonprofits, CICs, social enterprises to do the heart led work that they want to do, have more of an impact, but that's more sustainable because, with the cost of living crisis and the way that things are underfunded, I really want people who are so good at what they do and building community and creating a difference for young people, especially. That's where my heart is because I felt like when I was a young person, there were only like several things that were free and I was able to access. So I
Yeah.
want young people to have more opportunities. So I'm working with a lot of social enterprises to plan their funding applications, grant funding, tenders, because basically it's the redistribution of money
Yeah, yeah, well,
to the people who know how to use it, have the lived experience of and the and professional experience to do it. And then also because my background is in research, then I really want them to have a really good evaluation of those services so that they can go for the bigger pots of funding. So I'm always thinking like long term, like what are we going to be doing? How do we take over the world in the next 10 years?
yeah, yeah. Well, but also too is it also has to be that it's a unique factor to being an American because it's like you don't really have that much access to government funding or community funding or project based.
Yes.
work, is it? So I
Yeah.
mean, you must have found that pretty interesting here,
Yes.
because I mean, one of those skill sets that you developed, as you were saying, is like bid writing or grant bidding. So like, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, like in the course of discovering that, I mean, what do you feel about that?
I mean, one of the first funding I got was for my PhD. So got $15,000 a year to do my PhD at Penn State. Didn't finish it there, but and we kind of talked about that. But that was one of my first funding applications. And then
Yeah.
when I came to England back in 2007, I started to write funding applications for early career awards. Was successful in getting a prize in Parliament within 2 years of coming to England. And then I went to Durham University and brought in probably around £1 million for doing like helping families to understand how to talk to their children, to get children to have more empathy for people. And, you know, because when you talk to a young child, it's not just the words you use, but how you use them. We started to do research on that.
Yeah.
And I was so fascinated by that and feeling like I was making a difference before even kids, you know, come to have any kind of like problems in high school or getting into any kind of delinquency. So I really wanted those early intervention kind of programs. And then I started to build up my, you know, kind of funding bids through that. But then I started to work with nonprofits once I came to Liverpool. Started working in Chester, Kirby, North Birkenhead. I was on the steering committee for the Cradle to Career program in North Birkenhead, which was the first of its kind, and now it's being rolled out to Liverpool and other parts. And I loved that. So I was involved in kind of like giving them advice on like the evaluation, the funding streams that they could look into, and giving them the kind of background for all of that. And when I left the university in 2021, I was like, I want to continue to help organizations to do that. How do I do that in a sustainable way for myself as well?
Yeah. It's also mainly working with organizations that have a social benefit, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, and everything, which, as you said, is like in your, a warehouse. But also, too, is like you have like a Latino background, so you did a lot of stuff with South America as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so we got some funding from British Embassy, from ODA grants, which I can't remember what that stands for, something development, of global South countries. So we got funding to go to Ecuador and spent a couple weeks, went to 5 universities
Wow.
and taught the young people there how to be a good bystander if they see things that, you know, are like sexual harassment. How do you do that in a way that you keep yourself safe, but you're still stopping this, you know, kind of gender-based violence that's happening in certain parts of the world. It's happening everywhere, isn't it? It's not just certain parts of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
It's,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like discrimination and harassment is common everywhere. So knowing how to get people who are kind of the people watching, the witnesses, involved in a safe way was really dear to my heart. So that's something that I'm still currently doing, going to Colombia next year to
Yeah.
continue doing that work. So I'm really excited. Even though I'm not in academia, I still want to be
Yeah,
involved.
yeah.
Like, how do I keep my fingers in all the pies?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like again, you talk about having a PhD, and it's like your background is in psychology, but it's interesting how you said that you've always been fascinated by psychology since you were like around 12 years old.
Yes.
So, what do you think it fascinated you about the mind or something, or the
Well,
mindset, shall we say?
yeah, mindset, definitely. When I was 12, we went to visit my aunt in New Jersey. I think I told you that she lived in Paterson, now I remember.
Yeah.
And she had a book, and it was like a college textbook. And I started reading about sleep and how important sleep is to our mental health.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I was hooked, which is why my PhD, when I first started, was in psychobiology. So it was kind of like the idea of stress and anxiety and how that affects our immune system and everything. And that's what really fascinated me. But I think also the child component part of it, or the young people and how they develop, was really about understanding, like, I had so many traumatic things happen to me as I was growing up. We lived in a trailer park. We lived, I grew up poor, so we would just live with whoever. Sometimes we lived with my grandparents. Sometimes we lived with, people we didn't know that well. And so, bad things kind of happened to me. But I was like, how? And I was arrested when I was 16. So I thought, oh my God, I'm going downhill. Like I'm not going to make it to 18, with everything that I was doing. And then I realized, like, what was saving me? You know what I mean? I realized, like, having my grandparents, having my cousins, my aunts and uncles was really saving me and really a
So
protective,
family.
yes, family, but also, like, there were some adults at the school that I went to that I confided in. And I think it was having that community and realizing, okay, how can I get community for young people who are coming up the track who can't afford, psychological help because I couldn't afford a therapist, right? So it was about community that was, helping me. And since then, I've been all about like building community and building like collaborations. And a lot of the organizations that I work with now, like Capoeira for All, they're all about like community-based, kind of interventions. And that's always what I've been doing since then. It's never been about like individual psychotherapy or individual, what are you like as an individual? It's like, who's supporting you? Who's cushioning you? And so I've done research on like friendships and parents and, more than parents, like what other adults do you have in your life that can support you? Because I feel like coming from a Latin American background, we're all about community,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So many
yeah.
people are like, how many cousins do you got?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Like, actually, just a little side note on that, again, being from New York. I mean, how has it been for you, like, coming over here? Because it's like, I, I grew up in Spanish Harlem. You know what I mean?
That's where
So,
my dad grew up.
I mean, I'm kind of like, Puerto Ricans, man, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's a whole different nationality or group. And they came over here, it's like, where are they? You managed to get rid of the, what's going on? I mean, but then people from like, Portugal or, or the Spanish countries and everything. So how is it been for you? I mean, do you feel like you're missing something when you don't see as many people of that culture?
Yeah. I think I've found people who have similar culture,
Really?
but not maybe from Puerto Rico. Like
Yeah.
they might be Jamaican or they might be
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Italian.
but come on now.
Italians are
Yes,
also
yes,
really warm,
yes.
and you're like, come give me a hug. And it's not,
Yeah,
and
but it's
like
not the same.
hold hands and everything, like going down the street, and it's not weird. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Or
yeah,
like when I
yeah.
went to Cyprus and everybody's like holding hands and dancing, and I'm like, oh, this is my people. Plus the food, it's
Yeah,
got to
yeah.
have garlic,
Gotta
otherwise
have
it's not
I
food.
gotta have myself some coochie fritos, man. I call it golden chicken. When it's a lot of grease.
I only moved to Liverpool because somebody told me they had plantains galore.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, this is
Okay.
pro number one.
Yeah,
Come to
yeah, yeah.
Liverpool.
Okay. No, 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 no. That's true. That's true. That's true. So one of the things you said to me was like your focus. You said education was the way out. I mean, what do you mean by that?
From when I was a kid, and we were living in a trailer park, my mom always said, like, do well in school because that will be your ticket out of poverty. And that's how because she really believed in education. My dad, like I said, he grew up in Spanish Harlem. He didn't even graduate from ninth grade. So, he never graduated high school. My mom just had a high school education, but that was like instilled in me, like do well in school. Also, I think it was like doing well in school was the way that I like felt worthy as a person. I don't know if that's like just the American dream that they sell you, but somehow I attached my self-worth to education as well. Like getting good grades and getting a gold star was like, okay, I'm a good person. If I didn't get the gold star, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just the worst.
Yeah.
So I think there was something in that as well. So in addition to being like, this will get me out of poverty, it was also like, this makes me feel like I'm a worthy human being, which came into play as I was, then leaving my academic job a couple years ago and starting my own business because I just felt worthless. But I was always told, like, do well in school and everything will open up for you. Kind of true. It's still difficult if you're Puerto Rican and if you're poor because you just don't really know how to navigate the systems, and a lot of blocks come along the way, and you don't really know how to get by them. And I didn't have my mom to kind of, like, what do I do now? Like, I failed one of my things at university. Now what do I do? And so that was difficult. And then the other thing is, like, I took on so much debt to get my PhD, even though, I got like a fellowship, I got, it fully funded. The reality was the funding didn't cover most of my expenses, especially when I was living in New Orleans, which is where I finished my PhD. And the rent and the cost of living is so high in New Orleans, and my pay was not enough. So I took on a lot of debt, and I still have that debt now. More than half of it is still left, even though I've been paying.
I think a lot of people have that kind of like college debt.
Yes. Nowadays, yes.
Yeah.
I was the original, I had the Gen X debt.
The Gen X debt. The Gen X Latinx debt. But,
yes.
Well, you must have learned something because, like, basically you did a lot of journal writing. I mean, an incredible amount. I mean, you've managed to, as you said, be published like about 70 times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, school must have been good for you.
Yes.
I mean, like, what would you say would be kind of like the common denominator in these journals, these stories that you were writing?
I mean, so they were scientific articles published in, world-leading scientific publications, and a lot of them. So they're kind of self-contained scientific projects. So a lot of them were about the research that I was doing. One of the first ones that I published that was then recognized by, not by Parliament, but I was in Parliament when I got my award. It was the Neville Butler Memorial Prize, was understanding how parents change over time based on their child's behavior. So we followed families for a few years. And assessed their children and assessed the parents, and then looked at the child's delinquent activity over time. And parents were changing because of their child's behavior. So parents were backing off. So as their kids were getting more and more like out of control, parents were like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know how to control my child anymore. So then parents kind of like go, there's nothing I could, I've tried everything, there's nothing I can do. And they back off. The child got worse over time because the parent was backing off.
Exactly.
But, you can't really blame parents. Like, in my papers, I was really about understanding the process, because it makes sense if your child, like when I was doing bad things when I was a teenager, I don't blame my mom for being like, there's nothing I can do about her, because it's really difficult to stay involved, and nobody gives you the tools as a parent to be able to, like, what do I do in this situation? We don't come with a manual. Like, kids don't come with a manual. No. So my big thing was about educating parents and going out onto, like, any kind of like science festivals, going out to pubs. I was doing science cafes in Durham, and getting teachers and parents in there and explaining what the research showed and giving them practical tips that they could use. I loved that. So the journal articles, nobody was reading, let's be honest. Like, no one's going to read these scientific journals because they're for scientists. They're written in a scientific language. Yeah. So I loved going out and being able to, like, give people a picture of what a child is like that's going through a spiral, and then providing them with tools to be like, this is how you get this child out of a spiral, and giving even sometimes my example of like, look at where I am now and where I was when I started out, and it can happen. The support isn't there maybe from our services, but we can still give parents the tools to be able to kind of turn that around, but also giving the children, tools and like, where do you see your life going, Did
you do anything around neurodiversity as the new topic of discussion nowadays? Did you do anything around that?
Yeah, I studied a lot about like conduct disorder, ADHD. So some of the
autistic spectrum and all that kind of
I didn't know. I published. Well, some of the people I published with did a lot of research on autism, but we didn't know a lot about girls with autism back then.
I know. That is a new thing that is like as the explanation of why girls act the way they do. Because a lot of people are now only now starting to tie it into autism because when you have the spectrum, it's the factor that it's so wide and so non-specific.
Yeah.
That you got to treat it like a rotary dial. Like a child. That's why they don't try to diagnose children nowadays because they have to wait for a longer term of observation.
Yeah.
Because it's like we could misdiagnose this
Yes.
person by just saying, oh, they have Asperger's or they
Yes.
have dyslexia or whatever. And then it's like, oh, they're showing signs of self-mutism. How did that happen? You know what I mean? So it's confusing. But have you not encountered that kind of confusion in your research and stuff?
Yeah. So one of my research subjects was about not understanding other people's emotions. So when you see a fearful face, you might say like, oh, I think they're surprised or even happy because when you show fear, you show your teeth but your eyes become really wide. So the way to identify emotions in people, you should look at their eyes. So one of the research projects that I did was looking at eye tracking. Where do kids look on the face when they're determining what emotion they're showing?
Wow.
So I did eye tracking, and that was one of the projects that I finished and wrote up before I left academia, was looking at how children come to understand other people's emotions and where do they look up on the face. And the kids who are not looking at the eyes, what are their behaviors like? And actually the kids that weren't looking at the eyes and misidentifying fear were those who were more aggressive, more bullying in their behaviors. So it's kind of like we need to get down on their level. When you get down to the level of a child, they have to look at you in the eyes.
Wow, that's fascinating, because I remember, hearing a lot about micro expressions and stuff like that, and then they started to put it into TV shows like Lie to Me with Tim Roth and all that other kind of stuff. You start thinking, oh, I know how I can figure out that person's lying to me because I'm looking at their eyes and everything. And then, I'm fascinated. Like, there are people who don't even look at you. It's like, what's going on there? What's going on behind those eyes? So it is a fascinating thing.
But I will say, people with autism are not aggressive, but they might not look at the eyes, but it's a completely different. So that's why I was interested in the two kinds of ways that this could manifest into behavior. One of them being more kind of anxious and the other one being more aggressive. So it was a lot of the research that I was doing was kind of understanding how those two separate. And I went into prisons as well and did eye tracking with some of the prisoners who were there for murder or things like that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, you were talking about how in some of your prison research you was, getting to talk to killers, and finding out why they became killers and stuff. And that's like, okay, so are you one of those true crime podcasters, doing a little bit of mind hunting? You know what I mean? Just one of your personal loves.
One of the guys kind of said to me something that in Clarice Starling.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh,
Clarice.
Weird. Yeah, I didn't interview them about their crimes. I was really understanding their being able to process emotions.
Oh, okay.
So I showed them emotional faces. And what's weird is one of them said to me. So I show them faces of anger, ask them is it cross, happy, or shocked for fear. Those were the words that they would use. And one of them said, he just started laughing hysterically. And I was like, what happened? And I stopped the experiment. And he was like, you just showed me somebody's O face.
Oh.
Right? Okay. Oh. And I was like, I don't want to probe too much into this. Right? And I said, which face was it? So I looked at it later on when he told me which face it was. It was 3 faces back. I then looked at it later on when I went back to the lab, and it was a fear face. And
Well, he is in prison.
he's in prison. This makes sense. So
He hopes that is the whole thing.
things like this were fascinating to me. So I think emotions and the way that you perceive emotions is really important for like our behavior, you know, because it determines how we think that other people think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We make it up as we go along. And stuff. So before we go, because I mean, like I said, we did talk about like your past and everything, and in your journey, you uh, were not just involved with Warner Brothers, like special products, but I liked your experience around your love of music and Tower Records and stuff like that, because it takes me back as
Yes.
well. You know what I mean? And stuff like that,
Yes.
because I was wondering how this young girl from that past came to the present that we're now hearing about.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. Your younger years. In the music band love.
Yeah.
I'll call it that.
I think in terms of my Latin American roots and, Puerto Rico, I mean, salsa and bomba and plena are all like
Look at
musical
that
styles.
accent coming out now, people. You didn't hear that before, but now it's here.
Yo hablo español también.
Please don't. Yeah.
And my dad had a conga, from way back, and so he'd always be playing. He'd always dance with me salsa, and I loved when he like put my arm around the back, and I was like, "Ooh, how'd you do that?" And then when I went to New York, music was a big part of New York.
Yeah.
It was a big like De La Soul used to come into our record shop, right? And I just got into all kinds of music, and I was also writing poetry. I was also writing like fictional stories. I was an actress, like I was doing like acting at the YMCA, nothing like on Broadway or something, but like in the Y. And I loved being creative, and I made my own clothes for a while as well. I was doing people's hair, I was cutting their hair, loved creative like things. And then everybody kept saying, I think because I was thinking like I need a job that is going to pay the bills and that I'm going to have like I'm not going to be back on food stamps ever. Do you know what I mean? Or on benefits. So how do I make a plan for myself? And my guidance counselors were like, well, you're good at maths and, science, so you should do psychology rather than hairdressing. Who knows if that's true or not, but that's the route that I took. And I gave up I did it on the side, right? So I worked at Warner Brother Records while I was in LA. I worked at Tower Records for 4 years. And I just loved all the creative things. And then I felt like it was almost like putting away your toys and going to do my PhD.
Yeah.
Gave up all the creative things. I'd also been into martial arts while I was in LA, and I gave that up. Going to concerts, stopped going to concerts. And it's only till recently that but I would write blogs. So I have a blog that I've kept for a lot of years. And in the blog, when I go back to it now, there were blogs where I was like, how do I keep my creativity while I'm doing science? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I started to bring in roller coaster VR in my science.
Wow.
And I was like testing people's like stress response to the roller coaster and then trying to understand how that related to their ability to recognize emotions and empathy and behavior. I was like, how do I bring in more creative things into my science? And now I'm just broken out and I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm bringing everything back in.
Well, yeah, but when you were talking about doing, emotional well-being, you were saying how you bring music and dance into that and stuff.
Yes.
Getting people to, when you do the group work and stuff like that. So it's in you, and you manage. So now we understand where it's coming from. It's like you gotta keep that going.
And in Puerto Rico, like bomba is like healing, and it's a form of resistance as well. And I feel like when I left academia, I healed through doing like Jump Up and Be Seen, which Movma did while I was leaving academia. And so I found a lot of healing through like dancing and movement and connecting more with my body rather than just being up here all the time.
Yeah.
So now that's what I help a lot of people do as they're contemplating a career change. It's like, we need to get out of here because this isn't, it's just going around in circles because you're going, but I don't know this and I don't know that and I don't know if I want to do this or that. It's like, go back to your answers are in here.
Yeah. It's in the core, right? It's in that gut, yeah? And all that other kind of stuff. I mean, Luna, I got to tell you, it's been a fascinating conversation. I mean, one is just to hear that sound again, that language and everything. Once you started going, I was like, oh, I was lost in the sauce. That's just me. Making me think I need to have a Cuban sandwich right about now. But either way, I want to thank you very much for joining me here in the studio.
Yes, thanks, Chase.
Luna Munoz, she runs Luna Leadership. So, I mean, how can people find you if they were interested in some of your career coaching and consultancy?
Yep, you can go to lunaleadership.com and find me there. I'm also on all the social medias. I do have a TikTok, which is Luna Moonreacher.
Which probably has her dancing.
It probably does have my dancing, yes. Instagram is Luna Clara Munoz because I'm the clear moon and I bring clarity to people's career changes.
Yeah,
and also on LinkedIn, obviously. You have to be on LinkedIn to be doing business. And Facebook, I have a Facebook group called The Great Academic Escape. It's for everyone who wants to escape from academia. And I focus more on that kind of emotional clarity because I think that's where you get the whole motivation and propelling forward. And also all the CICs can find me on lunaleadership.com. So everything is on there in terms of my background and experiences.
Well, I encourage you to go seek it out and everything like that and find out more from Luna about what she's experienced and how she can personally help you experience more. So thank you once again for joining me here in the studio. I'm Jay Johnson Lynch. Please like and subscribe and, let us know what your thoughts are and everything and listening to this podcast. As you know, we encourage you to kind of check us out so that way we can have more conversations like this. But until then, we out of here.
Thank you.
So, thank you, dear Luna.